Our guest this week, Meredith Heller, is a California poet in the schools and author of Write a Poem, Save Your Life, a guide for teens, teachers, and writers of all ages. Here's one thing she tells her students.
Write so that you learn something you didn't know you knew.
Welcome to Writers' Voices with Monica and Caroline. I'm your host, Monica Hadley, and with me is my mother and co-host, Caroline Kilborn.
And hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good day today.
And getting time to read.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that one of the advantages of retirement, Mom? Are you finally getting to read as much as you'd like?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. No, I never have enough time.
No, yeah.
Really, because there's too many things, so many books, so little time.
That is true. That is true. Well, our guest today is a writer, like most of our guests are. She's a poet, and she teaches writing and poetry. Meredith Heller is a poet, singer, songwriter, and educator with degrees in writing and education. She studied in the graduate departments of Johns Hopkins University, Naropa University, and Goddard College. She's the author of several poetry chapbooks and a California poet in the schools, where she teaches workshops for grades 1 to 12. And in the creative writing department at Marin School of the Arts, in Juvenile Hall, and nationally on Zoom, which you can find out more about by checking out her website, meredithheller.com. Now, the book we're talking about today is Write a Poem, Save Your Life, a guide for teens, teachers, and writers of all ages. Welcome to Writers' Voices, Meredith.
Oh, thank you for having me. So happy to be here.
Write a poem, save your life. That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah. Well, it's my story, and it's what motivated me and put me on the mission to teach others and show others this incredible path of writing for healing and empowerment and self-expression.
It's been a few years, but we had done a couple of interviews and books about writing as a healing path in the past, and I think it's really good to bring that out again. Normally we have our guest read later in the show, but because what you're going to read is really that story of why you were inspired to write this book, then I think we'll just start off with that.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah. Okay, so here is the introduction to Write a Poem, Save Your Life. At 13 years old, disenchanted with society and in search of a deeper truth, I leave home and school and raise myself, living in domes I build in the woods, old barns and abandoned houses along the Potomac River. I do whatever I can for cash, gardening, cleaning, making jewelry from the dead snakes I find on the road. I teach myself to tan the snake skin, attach it to a tube of beads I've sewn, and make it into bracelets I sell at a store in town for food money. I'm kicking around with a free-spirited gang of musicians, experimenting with drugs and sex, testing our edges, all of us desperately wanting to figure out who we are and what we believe in. I watch as my friends go down, overdose, suicide, mental hospitals, struggling with life-draining depressions I've had since I was a child. I often lose my faith. But each time I hit my lowest point, when I no longer care whether I live or die, the poetry comes. The first line is a gift, whispered in my ear. I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's my lifeline. I grab hold of the words, write them down, and then dive in and write without moving for 5 or 10 or 20 hours until I've finished a new poem or song. Working on poetry becomes a reason to live, something bigger than me, a way to channel my overwhelming feelings and make something tangible, make beauty from suffering. At 14, I'm brutally raped and beaten by a boyfriend and left for dead. In shock and shame, I crawl inside myself and stop speaking for months. I feel myself dissolving, pulling further and further away, retreating into a dark place where no one can find me. When I'm just about to let go of my life, the poetry comes, and the more I write, the stronger I grow. Naming my pain, I write, clenched fist. My head is lead, my heart stone, my body a clenched fist. My lips that once kissed you are now cracked and bleeding, dried up crones, too bitter even to gossip. Then finding my voice after months of mute numbness, I write, how to hum. Do you remember how to listen to your heart without crying? Better yet, how to hum. It was the high reach of your voice that like a rope you climbed out of the knotted jungle through the burnt lung of night. When I'm 16, my best friend commits suicide, shocked and heartbroken, trying to make peace with my own pain and her passing. I understand that it could have been me, and I write, passage of light. Years after your anger boiled itself dry, scorching the vessel of your being clean, I came to understand that we are the same animal, that our wounding bleeds the same color, only a different shade, and yours has left you softer. It has not disfigured you, sucking pain to your shoulders like pins to a magnet. It has not gnawed through the nerve sheath, leaving you at its feral edge like me, where comfort knows no home, at my name changes with the passage of light. A year later, my boyfriend ODs on heroin and burns down our warehouse. Bereft, I feel the song lyrics for Little Boy Blue coming to me like a gift. I sit all night with my guitar and write until the sun comes up. That night I play it at a coffee house downtown. Writing the song allows me to access my feelings of loss and anger, to begin to accept what feels impossible, and finally to see that we were both struggling in our own way to grow toward the light. I write, Little Boy Blue with the Hot Wheels tattoo, your hands are empty, your promises few. I read your palm in the candlelight. I saw how you'd burn me. I saw how you'd die. I'm out behind the firehouse, praying for a sign, sifting through your ashes. I hear them whisper your lines. Up on Danny's rooftop, we watched the full moon rise. You rocked me so sweetly to the rhythm of your lies. Down in Blagden Alley, where the crooked hookers hung, we grew up like wild weeds, reaching for the sun. Do you want me to keep reading?
Yes, go a little further.
Okay. My whole life I've written poems and songs that saved me. Writing helps me connect with myself, name the feelings that threaten to consume me, pour myself into the deep and meticulous work of crafting a poem or song, and turn my pain into something meaningful. Poetry is a lifeline. Writing is the medicine that cleans out the wound and heals the hurt. At 17, I'd saved enough money from gardening and house cleaning jobs to spend a year hitchhiking through Europe. Everywhere I traveled, I met people like me, people searching in their own ways to figure out who they are, what makes them happy, and what gives them a sense of belonging. I came away asking myself, what can I do with my life that feels meaningful to me? I returned to Washington, D.C., passed the high school equivalency exam, and attended massage therapy school, which was how I supported myself for the next 27 years. When I was 25, I started college and worked my way up from remedial classes to honors classes, graduating magna cum laude and receiving a fellowship to the writing seminars at Johns Hopkins University. But I found I was still searching for who I was and what mattered to me. I had a private practice in massage therapy, spinal cord injury rehabilitation, and health coaching. I worked as a gardener, wilderness guide, and performing singer-songwriter. I managed a retreat center in Hawaii, and I started my own company teaching music and movement classes for children. One day, while hiking through the woods along the Potomac River, I had an epiphany. If I could get to the kids who were like me, bright and creative, who learn differently and who don't fit in, if I could help them to know their worth and their capabilities, discover their passion and their purpose before they give up on themselves and society, then everything I'd been through would be worth something.
And I think that's a good place to stop. I didn't want you to stop before we got to the light.
We gotta get to the light.
Got to get
That's
to the
why
light.
we write ourselves to the light.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm.
So, man, when you look back on that, and then where you're working now with kids, and there's so many troubled young people in the world today, don't you want to just save them all?
Yes, definitely. I want to save them all. I love what my friend Susan Wooldridge of Poem Crazy wrote in the foreword. She said, join Heller on her quest to save the world, one new poet at a time. And it's funny because she and I spoke, and when she first wrote that, she said, to save the world one poem at a time. And I said, no, it's the poet we have to save. It's the person. The poems come next. And so, yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. I do. And I think the challenging part in working with teens especially is allowing them to find their own way. Like, I can offer all of my life experience and my wisdom and my clarity and what I see in them in terms of their potential and their gifts and their talents and their skills. I can name it all and tell them, but the work of owning who they are has to come from them. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a necessary piece of growth in whatever it takes us, like my crazy life, whatever it takes us to get to the point where we finally believe in ourselves and value ourselves and create purpose out of what we've gone through, and then make it into something to contribute and share and help others. But I think that's the most challenging part is, yes, I want to save them, but just because I can see who they are and what they're capable of doesn't mean they can.
And you can't reach them all.
Yeah, you can't reach them all, even when they're right in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think, like in understanding my own process and what I went through, I didn't have role models, but, occasionally I could tell there was somebody who maybe believed in me, but because I didn't believe in myself, it didn't matter yet. I had to go through what I went through to come to the point where I believed in myself and valued myself. And so that's the really challenging part of working with teens. I wish that I could just grab them up and put them in front of the mirror where they see their own beauty and value. But they have to want the mirror. They have to want themselves. you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, and it's not just teens, it's people of all ages, who are struggling, who are, have depression or various challenges in their lives. And you think if they could just see what I see.
I know. I'm teaching women's workshops now. Since COVID, that's the new population that I started workshops with on Zoom. And so I have women all over the country in these Zoom workshops, and so many women in life transitions. I mean, it doesn't even have to be depressions or harrowing, devastating circumstances that brings us to the healing power of writing. It's just life changes, and COVID brought up so much changes for so many of us, how we live, what our lifestyle is like, being quarantined. Oh my God, what do I do with all this time with myself? Yikes! Wow, why don't you start writing? Who, me? But the women in my workshops are just loving it. It is such a thrilling new community to be part of. And there's even something good, I feel, about being on Zoom in that it offers us just one degree of privacy. You know what I mean? So even though that we're missing like the human contact and seeing everybody's body language and reading all of those subliminal signs that we do so naturally, and being in each other's presence and the chemistry and alchemy that happens, Zoom, there's something special about Zoom in that, especially doing something like writing and sharing poetry, which can be vulnerable in a good way, having just that little bit of separation, I've seen that it really allows people to open up in ways they might not have if we were all sitting in a group in a class or out in nature somewhere. You're in the privacy and comfort of your home. I mean, I always tell everybody, first and foremost, get comfy, because we're going to be here together, and I want your body to be relaxed so that you can access feelings and emotions and memories and deep psyche. So I have women show up like lying in bed under their blankets with their covers and their journal. And it's fabulous. And people are like, oh, excuse me, I just need my little bite of chocolate, or I'm going to go make a cup of tea. I'll be right back. Just like we're all in our homes together, we write and we always share. And this community that's growing in these workshops, I mean, we laugh, we cry, we watch the cycles that each of the women go through in their writing and in their lives, and we're really writing for ourselves. How do we write in a way that nourishes us? That I always say, write so that you learn something you didn't know you knew. And when you hit that point, it becomes very alive. And this is what draws us back, I feel, to keep writing, because it becomes, again, like this mirror. We learn something about ourselves, the metaphors that come from deep psyche, when we just get into that flow of, what's happening in me right now? How do I write about this? It doesn't need to sound like any kind of poetry you've ever heard before. It needs to be your voice, the way you speak, the way you write, the way you think and feel, your own unique images and metaphors. And when you find that place in your own writing, like I say in the book, there's a sense of salvation, like, I've come home to myself. I can be myself. I can be completely honest here in my writing and say things I might never. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention for people who are maybe just tuning in that we're speaking today with Meredith Heller, author of Write a Poem, Save Your Life, a guide for teens, teachers, and writers of all ages. Mom, you taught teens for many years, and you were as an English teacher. And did you teach writing at all?
Yeah, now and then. But teens were sometimes reluctant to express themselves. But I did try to do that. But the sharing part of your Zoom things. I know I had a writing group at church of adults, and that was one of the most important parts of it, was the sharing. And I think that is because you think, oh, you hear something, you think, oh yeah, I know what they're talking about. That happened to me. It's just enlightening. It really is.
Yeah. Meredith, how are your Zoom workshops structured? Is it like you meet once a week for a certain amount of time, and does it go a specific number of weeks? Or like if someone's interested in joining, how would that work?
Great, thank you. So yes, we meet once a week. It's a 5-week series, and I do them consecutively. I usually take about 2 weeks off in between. So they run, my next ones start, I think it's the week of September 15th. I'm teaching this summer, but we're into the last week now. And so they go for a 5-week series. We meet once a week for an hour and a half. And we start with, I introduce a topic for that class. I read some example poems. I usually either lead us through some kind of mindfulness where we close our eyes and connect with body and connect with our feelings, and we might each speak a few words from that place. And then once we're in that kind of deeper state of being, with the example poems as a template and to give us a guideline, then we do our own writing. And people can write poetically, in poetry, in prose, whatever comes naturally, especially for the first class. I always say whatever comes most naturally, whatever gets you going and flowing. And then you can experiment as we go. So then we write for about 20 minutes, and then we share. And I give a little feedback to each person when they share, mostly reflecting back the lines that I hear that really sing and shine, so that people in the workshop get an idea of the kinds of writing and the kinds of voicing that really bring a piece to life. And sometimes people want deeper editing, and I can do that with people through email after the class. Everyone usually sends me their poems, and I can give them more detailed editing suggestions. And I always say, take with a grain of salt. If you like it, use it. If you don't, ditch it. And yeah, because some people have school anxiety, and like your mom was saying, I so agree with that. The sharing is so important. There is something in the being witnessed, being heard for ourselves, the reader, to be heard and received. Oh, it's so powerful. And then for the other people who were listening to say, oh, she said that she talked about what I've gone through. She named it. She said it in a way that makes sense to me, that helps me to understand what I'm going through when I didn't know the words of how to say it. And this is so powerful for us. Women have been meeting in circle since the beginning of time to share our wisdom and our life experience, to mark our life and growth cycles. And I think that we're missing that in this culture, this rite of passage that marks the changes and the different growths, the births and deaths and new beginnings and letting go of things as we grow and age and come to different points in our lives. And so the workshops this fall that I'm teaching is Rite of Passage, W-R-I-T-E, Rite of Passage, Growth Cycles, Roots, and Wings. So it's all about what gives us this sense of home and rootedness and stability, and how do we have a foot in what is home as we grow our wings to reach into whatever we're moving into next in our life. And how do we straddle that place, and how do we write it so that we create our own maps so that we learn the way, because it'll probably come back around again. We don't just grow once, you know, and letting go is a hard thing, and doing something new takes courage. So we have to make our own maps. So when it comes around again, we remember that we know how to do it. We remember that we've done it, and then we can even offer those maps to other people to say, you can do this too. And also, I just want to say about fall workshops, I am so thrilled to share that I received a grant from the Institute of Poetic Medicine. And so I am fully funding a number of women and teen girls for my fall workshop. So if anybody listening is interested, please get in touch with me as soon as possible. I have a few spots left for women and more spots left for teens right now for the fall workshops. You can find me through my website, which is www.meredithheller.com, and that's MEredithHeller. And you'll find applications, and you can send me a note. But if anyone's interested, get in touch with me now, because spots are filling. And this has been my dream, to be able to fund women to take my workshop. So I am so thrilled. Oh my gosh.
Wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And you get a copy of my book, and you get, we're going to do an anthology of poems from the workshop that you participated in. So it's such an incredible opportunity. So please, anybody who's interested, get in touch now. Yeah.
Now, Meredith, let's talk a little bit more about the book and what, it sounds, I think you've been teaching and doing workshops for a long time. What really sparked wanting to put these ideas into a book?
Well, it's funny. I guess somewhere in me there was always the desire to write the book and perhaps to write my memoir, because it was such a challenging way to grow up.
Yeah,
to say the least, right?
Right.
And so, but I was always just so busy working. I mean, I figured I'd write a book, when I was 80 or something. So, I had written an essay for Common Ground magazine, and the essay was called "Losing My Innocence, Love's Forge." And I wrote it a couple of years ago, and I had a broken heart from a man that I had been in love with, who didn't want a relationship. And so I wrote this essay about it, about finding my way back to valuing myself and my own resiliency. And so an agent actually found my essay and read it. And this is so crazy, because it has to be like 1 in a million, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's like, what? And so I get this email from this agent, and I don't even know if it's for real or a scam or what, saying, I read your essay in Common Ground magazine. I'm an agent. I'd like to talk with you. So I got in touch, and then I did research to make sure he was legit, and he was, and he'd been in the business for like 35 years. And we got together and talked, and he said, you are a fierce writer. Do you have a book to write? And I immediately said yes. And then my second thought was, yikes, what have I said? And we talked a little about what that book might look like. I don't think he even had an idea of what direction we might want to go. I think he just sensed the story, and he saw that I was a California poet in the schools. And so I just started kind of shooting some ideas around, and I remember I met with him on November 10th, 2019, and so we were about to go into Thanksgiving. All my students went away for Thanksgiving vacation, and I was going to go camping, and instead I sat for 10 days. That was the length of time everyone was gone, a week and 2 weekends. I sat for 10 days in my cottage and wrote the entire first draft of the book.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like that, like full immersion, like in the book where I said, and I would sit for 5 or 10 or 20 hours, and that's just kind of what I do. So I sat for 10 days. I ate and everything, but I just put it all together, that first draft, and then spent about the next 6 months refining and editing and making it shine. And
describe how the book is structured.
Yeah, thank you. So the book itself can be used as a whole journey from beginning to end, like a trail guide. I'm a hiker. I hike every day of my life. Nature is my thing. And so this is like a trail guide, and it begins with questions that just get us thinking and digging deep, like beginning the excavation into self. Because for so many of us, it's hard to get started. How would I ever start? How do I break the ice? So I start with questions that help us break our own ice and begin this communication dialogue with ourself. And so then I go through 18 chapters that go from digging deep into family dynamics and looking at a picture of yourself from when you were 4 or 5 years old and communicating with that little person, asking, do you have anything I need to know, or is there something I'd like to say to you? And it's so powerful and meaningful. So we dig into memories, we dig into what does home mean to us? What are the memories you have of your first home? What makes it home? And what is home now for you? Then all kinds of fun writing explorations, colors and odes to fruit and vegetables and odes to your favorite pair of boots, or your favorite hat or jacket that, you just can't go anywhere without that jacket. So there's really fun exercises, and then I take people out into nature in the book, and invite you to build nature altars and nature art, finding seed pods or birds' nests or feathers and weaving them, the metaphors of these things, into your own poetry and prose. What does this feather mean for you? What is the bird's nest? What is the seed pod? What does the dead flower mean? What are the seeds? And then in that piece, I actually do this with my teens. We go out into nature and we build these art pieces and write about them. And if we go down to the beach, we then let the tide come and wash them away. And it's so powerful. It's like a way, it's like a ceremony. It's this, back to this rite of passage that I'm really interested in, that I think we're at a loss for in our society. So we do this rite of passage. Where are we? What do we want to mark? What do we let go of, and what are we calling in to empower us? And then I do a lot of work in this book with making connections, finding the larger family of life and community, and how do we weave ourselves through our writing into the whole community of life. We play with songs and music, and finally, in the end, there's a celebration of ourselves, claiming ourselves as writers, writing ourselves into our own empowerment. And so the way that I set this book up is to be a whole guided journey you can go on, but you can also just open it anywhere and pick a writing invitation and do it. And so there's each chapter starts with a little story about how I came up with the writing invitation. I call them invitations because the word prompt really bothers me. It makes me feel like one of those cows or something. So it's an invitation. It's an invitation to yourself, to your own creativity and to your own thoughts and feelings and perceptions. So I start with a little essay. This is what brought me to this place, or this is why I think this is important. And then I do the just right section where I give you the invitation of how to step into the writing, how to begin the writing. And then I have example poems from my students from the past 30 years of working with students in the schools. And these kids were just such phenomenal, beautiful writers with power and vulnerability and insight and willingness to question their own lives and beliefs and to ask themselves, who am I and what matters to me? And how do I find that through writing?
And, when you put the poems in, you also put their ages, and sometimes it's like amazing to me how sophisticated they are for their age. And,
I know.
Especially the use of metaphor and just concepts. It's like, it's hard for me to remember. Would I have even understood that at that age?
Yeah, well, I completely agree. I'm blown away by what the kids write. I mean, sometimes I'm just floored. My mouth drops because what they write is so gorgeous and excruciating sometimes. And I also think that, like what you're saying, the kids are very sophisticated these days. I think they're smarter than we were. I really do. I think that it's like this collective building. It's like the intelligence exponentiates as time goes forward. The kids are so crazy smart these days. But I agree. I mean, there's poems in here from kids that are 9 and 10 years old that touch me so deeply.
I know. Now, you mentioned, I think in the acknowledgments at the end, that all the poems from kids were printed with their permission. How did you go about getting that, like 5, 10, 20 years after the fact?
Well, I'll tell you one crazy story. So first of all, when some of the pieces that were from that long ago, when I was a poet in the schools in Boulder, Colorado, from 1996 to 2001, there were special poems that I got permission from those kids then, because I just knew at some point, even if it was when I was 80 years old, that I was had to do something because they were just so evocative. But I have this one story about a young woman who I taught in the schools in Boulder. She was 15. Her name is Nicole, and she wrote the poem in Ode to a Piece of Clothing. It is the poem about the scarf. I'll see if I can find it. So she was about 15 when she wrote that in Boulder. And then about maybe 5 years ago, I'm a dancer, and I was in the East Bay in California at a dance thing. And a young woman, beautiful young woman, comes up to me and says, "Did you teach poetry at New Vista High School in Boulder, Colorado?" And I took a look at her, and it was Nicole. And so she is now 40, and she comes to all of my women's workshops.
Oh.
And she is a gorgeous writer and human being. She's a dancer and a massage therapist and a gardener and a singer and a performer and a beautiful, beautiful poet. And so what a gift that is. I mean, can you imagine? And she just walked up to me. I mean, she recognized me immediately. I'm sure I didn't change, but here she was. She had grown into this beautiful woman.
Oh, that's wonderful. Did you find the poem? Do you want to read it?
Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
Okay. Ode to My Scarf. Oh, gosh, I actually wish I had another poem from her now to give you the comparison. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, that would have been good. So, Ode to My Scarf, Nicole, 15. Velvet snake, wrapped around my shoulders, crawls up my neck, protecting me from evil, and the biting chill that creeps down my back and brings sickness to my body, scented deeply. A field of wild flowers, can't stop smelling it every chance I get, all for this one feeling. Like symphonies and ecstasy, my body unravels. My naked neck reveals the kissing room where night consumed me, and fingers tease. I wrap my hand around the velvet creases of perfect memories, those deviled kisses with a French accent. Gorgeous.
You know, when I was a teenager, my friends and I all liked to write and collect poems, and we would put them, you know, this was back way before even photocopiers weren't all that easy to find. And so we'd hand write them out, and we'd put them in these books. So we had a word for the books. I can't remember what they were called, but they were in like these little pronged covers, you know. And one time, many years later, but still a long time ago, probably 30 years ago, I found mine from high school, and I'm looking through it, and I find this poem, and I think, wow, did I write that? That is really, really good. And then eventually I realized it was actually lyrics to a Jim Croce song. But it was really, really good.
Oh, that's so fun. Oh, my God. I love it. Gosh, that was a great poem I wrote. He kind of had the same idea.
Right.
He had that same experience. How interesting. Oh, my God, love it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's so fun. Yeah, I mean, I tell the story in the book about my old journals, which I had kept from when I was a teen into my 30s, and I moved a lot. And so I didn't have very much stuff. I never had more than would fit in the back of like my tiny little Honda Civic, but I dragged this box of journals around for 20 years. And I never read back through them, but I just couldn't get rid of them. I mean, what was I going to do? Put them in the trash? Somebody would read them. So I one day, a few years ago, after dragging this box around for maybe 20, 25 years, I woke up. It was a spring day, and I just suddenly had this hit. Oh, my God, it's the day. I'm going to go through these journals. And I sat on the floor for about 10 hours. And I read through them. I mean, not word for word. I skimmed a little. And I ripped pages out with stuff I loved and threw them on the floor to do something with later. And it was so empowering to see the journey I had been on and see how much I had struggled. I mean, it was very painful stuff that I wrote about, just the hurt and the sorrow and the loneliness that I had experienced. And but in reading it all, it gave me the sense that I had integrated my younger self into my now self. And that, I think, was what was waiting for me in my own development. Was I feel like I had gone through life kind of holding my past at bay because it was so painful. And it took a lot of energy for me to hold it at bay. I mean, my book is really the first time I begin to share my story with the world, with anybody. I kept it secret. And that was very empowering too, and freeing. But so reading back through these journals, like I integrated and I said, okay, I'm willing to accept and embrace that this is who I've been and this is what has helped shape me and sculpt me and make me into this person that I am now. And then after I read them all, I took them to the dump. I said,
are you sure you saved everything that you wanted to save?
No, I should really go back to the dump because you never know. I always throw out things I need.
Oh, yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah. No,
I
don't
think
ask
I
that.
would have
That's
been
a
tempted
terrible
to
question.
scan.
Don't ever ask that. It's too late now. Gone. You know, but it was like, okay, now I include all of me. And in reading back through them, that's what happened. And I never knew that was going to happen. I just thought, I think I'll take a look at who I used to be. It was so empowering. And of course now I'm probably going to have to rent a storage space for all my journals. Because oh my God, there's so many. And I'm not never getting rid of this stuff. This is really good stuff. You know?
You're listening to Writers' Voices with Monica and Caroline, and our guest today is Meredith Heller, author of Write a Poem, Save Your Life, a guide for teens, teachers, and writers of all ages. Now, Caroline, do you still journal? I know that you have most of your life. Are you still doing it?
No, I have a daily diary that I absolutely do every day, but I do journal besides that too. And I'm curious about you teach first graders things about poetry?
First graders, yes.
And how do you do that? That's amazing.
Oh my God, Caroline, such a good question. Well, the real answer is I'm not exactly sure. And I just came off of, I was teaching 25 classes a week for this last few months before school ended. And a lot of first graders I had this time. I think I taught about 60 first grade poetry classes with California poets in the school.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, it was wild. And, you know, one of the things that I do with them is a lot of out loud poetry. So lots of examples, lots of getting them to participate verbally, so that we do it in words first, because I get to them at the end of their first grade year. So most of them can write. I mean, they're just learning how to write in first grade.
Right.
And,
yes.
That's it.
So this is the end of the first grade year. So most of them know how to write. Some of them still need a lot of help. And, so we talk a lot. We throw ideas around. I write. We do a group poem on the blackboard. And that really gives them an experience of doing it together. Then I send them back to their separate desks with their paper and pencil and have them write their own piece that's like what we did as a group. So if we're doing Ode to the Color Green, you know, or let's say a personification of green. If green were a person, what how would Green get around? Would Green ride a bicycle or a skateboard? Does Green have a race car? Does Green fly in a jet plane? So we would have done one together so they know how to do it. But then somebody always asks, well, can we say what we said for the one that we did as a group? And I always say, no. No, come up with your own ideas. The one resource that will never go dry is your own imagination and your own ideas and thoughts and perceptions. So dig in there and stir it up and push yourself to come up with your own ideas. And even the first graders, they write amazing pieces. It takes a lot more patience to work with the first graders. Because no matter how many times I explain what we're doing, there's always a couple kids who don't get it, and that takes a lot of patience for me, because I would say that these days I'm more working with the teens and the women who are like, they get the invitation and fly with it, and then the real work is in the sharing and the feedback on what makes the poem come to life. Whereas with these little kids and the first graders, there's a lot of room for play. We can play with words and sounds and really engage imagination, but the actual writing of the poems for first graders is challenging.
Oh, definitely.
And I really feel for them. They're just learning how to write, and it takes a lot of energy for them to not only come up with their own creative ideas and wording, but then to make the letters and the words, and does it get what do they call it? Instead of a period, they call it an end dot. An end dot. Does it get an end dot? And, the first time I was like, I don't know. What is an end dot? Or, they don't know how to spell yet. And I always ask the teacher in the classroom, is it okay if they don't worry about spelling? Can we work on the spelling later so they can just get the thoughts and ideas out? And the teacher's always like, of course. So we say, best guess spelling. And then half the time when they come up to read their poem, they have no idea what they wrote. But I got very good at reading, oh my gosh, the most amazing spellings. I can't even think of them.
Oh,
but,
sometimes they are the spellings are so creative. It's just
so creative. And I would look at it and think about what they were talking about, and I would get it, and so it was this revelation for me, but they were so happy when I would get the word,
Oh, yes.
So it's a different experience, each different phase of development, emotionally and with being able to write and being able to read. Oh my gosh. Each one is different. It definitely kept me on my toes to be working with so many different grades at once.
Meredith, we don't have a whole lot of time left, and there's a couple other things I want to talk about. One of them is something I know Caroline agrees with you wholeheartedly, and that is that you ask people when they're using this book to write with pen and paper.
Yes. Yes, Caroline. So important, right?
Yes.
Something that's really kind of becoming obsolete with technology. But I really believe, and from my own experience, I find that writing with pen and paper engages more of who we are. There's something about using our bodies, using our hands in this fluid way, rather than push, as in, typing on a device, that engages our nervous system and our memories and our emotions and creates this muscle memory that keeps us coming back. There is a fulfillment and something organic. I mean, you think about how for how many centuries we've been writing, painting, with pen and paper. And so I really ask unless somebody has an injury or, arthritis or something that's really going to flare up, to give it a try. And the kids, too. Sometimes I have to argue a little with the teens to write with pen and paper. But there is just something so nourishing about pulling the pen or pencil across the texture of paper.
Now, Meredith, when you sat down for 10 days and wrote this first draft, was it pen and paper?
No, actually, it wasn't, but that was because I had shattered my right wrist.
Oh, my
bicycle
goodness.
Accident, and I couldn't use, I had 3 surgeries, and I couldn't use my right, and I'm right-handed. I couldn't use my right hand for 6 months. So I actually wrote this book typing with my left hand.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
I mean, it's even, that story didn't even get into the book, but it's in the 2 upcoming poetry collections. I have 2 upcoming poetry collections that are being published, River Spells and Yuba Witch, through Finishing Line Press, and those are on pre-order now, and they'll be out the middle of September. And the first one, River Spells, I wrote the whole thing with my left hand.
Wow. Well, I want to say too, for people who are writing, to keep something, some kind of a folder for these papers, for your poems, because these papers will get lost in a shuffle if you don't. And then you say, where is that? What did I do with that? At least, maybe it's just me, but I think there's other people that have the same problem. So,
I so agree, Caroline. Yeah, I have a whole section on writing journal, on what to choose, what I found works well. I actually like a sketch journal that doesn't have lines. Mm-hmm. Some people need lines. I can't stand lines because I want to start doodling, and sometimes I write big or practice my calligraphy, or a word needs to be really big or a word needs to be tiny. So it's like the different voicings that come out. So I think writing journal is so important too. Yes.
And one thing I want to mention, even though we're just about out of time, but when you talk in here about there's the 2 ways to go about creating a poem. One is fleshing out details, and the other is honing it to the bare essence. And that was really an important thing for me to learn.
I'm so glad. That makes me really happy. Yeah, that's kind of my way of saying it. You can either flesh it out, which means adding every little bit of detail that you can glean from the moment or the experience. And this brings it to life. The more detail and the more specifics that are unique to your experience, the more it's going to make an impact, be unique, and the person reading it or hearing it is going to remember, And
right.
So, I can tell you I sat under the tree, or I can tell you I sat under the maple tree, and the tips of the leaves were turning golden in the sunlight. And that's my experience, and you're going to remember that specificity, that detail. And then there's the other part, which is boiling it down,
right,
just to the bones, just to the very nuggets and jewels and tidbits of what's important. Me.
And you can combine the 2 in one poem, really.
Yes, absolutely. And then that gives it rhythm and texture.
Oh, well, we could spend a whole nother hour, but unfortunately we're out of time. Meredith, thank you so much for being with us today.
I so love talking with both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. I'm just, it really is.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you so much.
Yeah, she's
give it to everybody.
She wants it back now that she was reading it and then I was reading it. Now she wants it back. And
don't give it back. Don't give it back.
So, Caroline, do you have a closing quote for us today?
I do. This is my favorite quote. It was by Archibald MacLeish. A poem should not mean, but be.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
So important.
And see you all next week on Writer's Voices.
Bye, everyone.